trying to take your written content and make it into an actual course, video course, webinar, in-person event, whatever you feel like is appropriate. Another thing too, I encourage you, you're going to see I've sent you a document that looks a little bit like this. It's called Work for Work to Workshops. And it just basically has like some quick little sentences and things to fill in as you go through this. That's going to help give you a greater idea about what it is you actually want to do. And we'll go through these questions towards the end. First things first, why do we even want to do this to begin with? And I think a lot of times as writers, we want our written work to do everything for us. We like the idea that I put a book out into the world and everyone is going to pick up my book and it's going to do great. But the reality is that a book nowadays oftentimes is just like a business card, especially for writers, is how people can start to find you. But we can start building a larger platform around our book and creating video content or a course or a webinar or a workshop is one way you can start incorporating elements from your book into something else. This also starts to the other advantages include trying to build up your own authority. This starts to give you some experience you can put down on your resume. This also gives you experience in terms of leadership. People can start turning to you as a source of information, which is the larger goal. So this is one of the reasons why you really want to consider not just having a book, but starting to branch out into other components. This financially is also going to be a much more advantageous because now you're going to have multiple things that can feed into each other. You can direct people from your book to your workshop, and then vice versa. You can go from your workshop to your book. This can be helpful also, for instance, when talking with larger organizations, talking with colleges, talking with other places where you think you would be able to give your presentation. If you already have something in place, this is something that you can directly point to. When we're getting started, though, we kind of need to decide what is it that we actually want to even talk about. Just doing a presentation about your book on its own is probably not going to be enough. Or if you have poems, just doing a presentation about your poems or a workshop on your poems may not be enough. The goal is we want to start kind of trying to identify what is our theme. What are some devices and things that we can actually start picking at? And this is going to be fundamental because this is going to dictate everything. So things you want to start kind of analyzing your own work for when you're starting to devise your idea for how are you going to create your workshop? What do you want it to be about? You can maybe have it about a theme. So for instance, if you have a collection that has a central theme, you see that very often with chapbooks and even full lengths. Some themes I've seen in the past, themes related to family. If you have a theme related to fatherhood, for instance, I know I personally have a lot of like dad poems and things like that. Maybe you have something related to sports. So trying to decide what is a central theme that's your work constantly is made in reference to, because then we can also use maybe our own work as elements in the workshop. But maybe instead of themes, you want to talk about specific device. When we say device, what do we mean? We're talking things like metaphor, image. Maybe you want to focus on a rhyme scheme. Maybe you want to focus on a specific form of poetry, like a sonnet, a villanelle, a golden shovel. Or maybe there's a specific skill set that you want to tackle. So maybe you want to focus on the element of craft. Maybe you want to focus on conveying more emotion and tone. That's something, for instance, when I attended a workshop, the calorie retreat, that's something I worked on a lot with my own facilitators, is just establishing greater use of emotion in my work. So that I would define more as a skill. So trying to determine what are the elements in your own work that you can start branching off into specific courses on. And as you get more comfortable with this process, you don't even have to necessarily just stop at a single course. One thing you can consider is actually branching into maybe multiple. So maybe you can make a whole suite of courses. Maybe you could organize your own mini conference around a central theme. Like, hey, we're going to talk about figurative language. In the morning session, we're going to talk about metaphor and simile. In the afternoon session, we're going to talk about, I don't know, strategies for incorporating like magical realism into your work. In the evening, we're going to talk about whatever, so you can start kind of piecing together. But it all starts with at least having a single course that we can develop. Once we have the actual idea behind our course. What we can then do is start the planning and the logistics. For instance, in this top left, is this going to be a course that you want to do in person? Or is this something that you want to do online? So, for instance, this workshop right here, we're online right now. Okay. So, deciding what is do you think is going to be the best platform? Is it going to be a mix? Once you have an idea of that, we can then start actually trying to write the content. And as you're writing it, you don't need like a super heavy script, just making some bullet points or some quick ideas. For instance, in this case, what we did was we have a quick little PowerPoint presentation that we made. However, you feel is best to just kind of organize everything. You do want to be cognizant of time. So it may be helpful to kind of rehearse it on your own a little bit just to get an idea of how long you think things are going to take. A 30-minute workshop, I'll be honest, goes very quickly. Yeah, a 3-hour workshop gives you a little bit more time for considering maybe like generation of new content, letting people write their own poems or write their own work, maybe time for feedback and things like that. So the time aspect is going to determine a lot about how much preparation you're going to need for your course. Let's talk a little bit about what the next step is. Once you have your entire the idea for your course in place, and you don't even necessarily have to have everything hammered out. You don't need all the details, you don't need all the logistics, but you do need to start thinking about where do you want this to be held? Talking about venues. And so when it comes to venues, it can be very helpful if you know people that already have a venue space. That's obviously going to be very helpful. Let them know what your mission is, what your point is. In general, that can make it more accommodating. For instance, we have several spots. We are currently located in Columbus, Ohio. There are several people who own venue spaces that if I were to go to tomorrow and I was like, hey, I want to do this thing, they understand our mission for poetry. They're interested in poetry as well. So they would do things to help us out. It's not to say that necessarily the space would be free, although some places may be even willing to do that. But they may be more willing to kind of work with your schedule, maybe give a discount, things like that. Or maybe you could work together and cooperate on some sort of deal. For instance, if you're talking to like a bookstore, maybe there's something you can do to ensure to get a certain number of sales in exchange for a certain price or something like that. You want to consider the cost. Honestly, if you're the only person running your workshop, the biggest expense for you is probably going to be the venue space. It's not uncommon for venue spaces to charge things like $75 to $100 an hour. So this is again where if you can find, if you have connections with a space, use them. Other places that might work well for your location, if you're doing, for instance, a free event, many events can actually be hosted through local libraries. Not all cities are the same. Like, for instance, if you're located in New York, that's going to be, you're probably not going to be able to reserve a room for free. But for instance, in your smaller towns, so for instance, again, here in Columbus, Ohio, we can rent rooms or reserve rooms is probably the better word. You can reserve a room for free for what, like a 3-hour block or something like that. A perfect amount of time for leading a small workshop or multiple workshops. If your events cost money to enter, libraries may not always be willing to accommodate that. So there's something to consider. You want to be considering the time. Obviously, the longer you use the space, the more expensive it's going to be. You also want to be considering size because, again, larger spaces in general are going to potentially cost more. But again, if you're able to work through a venue again like a library, perhaps they may have larger spaces that you can still reserve for free. So there's definitely some things you want to be considering as you get the idea for your event, for your workshop. The next step, you want to be looking for the venue. This doesn't necessarily have to take a ton of time, especially once you start doing one or two multiple events. You probably already start having those relationships with those people. And if your event gives value to the business, so like let's say you can feel confident that you're going to have a decent turnout, you can even talk to the owners of the space and try to see if maybe instead of charging a rate for using the space, they may be willing to cooperate with you. Like, okay, we'll split the door, so we'll get 50% of all the ticket fees that come in if you're charging. You definitely want to be reaching out to the owners of these spaces as soon as possible. You try to give them ideally a couple months notice before your event actually starts going up. Now, the other thing that you want to be considering, we want to be thinking about what is the equipment needs. Now, for A lot of writing workshops, sometimes you may need like a projector and a screen, but a lot of times all that is necessary is maybe some printouts, which you can get out at like FedEx and things like that. You might just need like a whiteboard and some markers. Something I would really recommend, especially just acknowledging the era that we live in right now. This is 2023. Okay. So much about trying to get our work out there often involves multiple formats. Video is something I would strongly consider. Even if it's like just recording on your phone or something like that, I would strongly consider, if you have some sort of presentation happening or some sort of workshop happening, trying to record something that's happening during that time that can be used, immediately after, during, later. You also want to be thinking about taking photographs or things like that for your own portfolio and file to demonstrate in the future. So those are, you want to be thinking about materials. Other materials you may need like an easel, a whiteboard, something like that. I want to talk really quick about just some promotional considerations. I am not a marketer by background. Okay. I I'm an English teacher. A lot of things I'm telling you right now are things that I've learned from just managing my own business. I have my own teaching business. It's just me. So we're not like super big or anything like that. We're doing a lot of social media things, especially heavy on YouTube and things like that. A strategy that we have found that starts to be very effective is one that is suggested a lot by, there is a marketer that if you're interested in promotion and learning a little bit more about how to get events going, and this is not promotion, I'm not getting any money from this. It's just something that I have found to be useful, and maybe you will as well. There's a marketer by the name of Daniel Priestley. There's a book that you may like of his called Oversubscribed. And there's just a couple strategies that we have been doing that we have found to be effective for some of the events that we are running. The key thing that he really is pushing for, or really recommends, is I know that we want to sell tickets to our event. We want lots of people to come up. But instead of focusing on selling the tickets to the thing, what we really want to be doing is trying to create a sense of tension and visible interest in what we're offering. We are not interested in the sale itself right now, especially in those beginning stages of getting your workshop out there. You are interested in trying to create signals. You want people to see that there's interest in the thing that you are doing. Ideally, you want to determine how many seats your workshop or your course or whatever it is that you're planning, how many people you plan to serve the first time you're doing it. Whatever that number is, you want to try to receive, ideally, 5 to 10 times the amount of engagement. Because what that does is it signals to other people that there is interest in what you're doing. So, for instance, if you're holding a workshop for, in this case, for instance, like 4 people, well, then you would like to have, 20, 30 different people starting to express interest. Another example I can give is, for instance, we are organizing a retreat, the collective residency, for 2 female identifying poets. We have 2 spots. So what we've done is we've tried to demonstrate ways for people to express their interest in that. For instance, on our website, before we launched the actual opening for submissions, we had a little whiteboard where people could write their name or their contact information on social media, so that way other people could see that people were adding their name, so they could start getting an idea of the interest. And once we were able to get right around 10 times the spaces that we had, we then could start the actual registration and things like that. Not everyone who expressed interest is obviously going to apply, but just gets people understand, oh wow, this is something that is in demand. This is something I really want to be considering. So that is certainly something that I would really, really push for, again, we want signals. We're not necessarily just interested in the sale itself. We want people to express interest. And if we're not getting those sorts of numbers, then that can be an indication maybe we need to switch up the topic. Maybe we need to find something else that's going to resonate with people a little bit more. As you're making your course, okay? And I see Barnabas is here and he sells that action on threads. Exactly. Exactly. Um, we this is where we can really start to find ways to get people to express interest. This is where like it's likes are one thing and shares are obviously helpful, but we really want people to commit, comments and things like that become a lot more effective in that regard as well. Trying to get them onto another platform, just to kind of, wasn't planning on talking about this, but one other little highlight is when you're working with people that or when you want to work with someone, it becomes much easier the more points of contact you can have with that person. To give an example of this, what a lot of there's research called like Dunbar's numbers and things like that. But basically, the more interactions you have with someone, the more likely they are to want to work with you in the future. May not sound like rocket science, but people want to work with people they feel more comfortable with. Another thing that we've seen through research, again, this is through Daniel Priestley, one of the things that he found through studies that he was analyzing is that in general, you're looking at about 7 to 10 interactions with a person before they start actually kind of entering that friendship circle. They're no longer an acquaintance. They're someone that you actually maybe start calling a friend. Ways that you can speed up this process. If you can find people that are meeting you in 4 different locations, there basically was a study. And again, you can look at the book that I mentioned earlier if you want more information about it. There basically was a study. I'm just going to give a quick summary. Basically, was a study. They had 2 people, they had people engage in conversations with each other in pairs. And they had those conversations. Basically, they asked them to talk for like 2 or 3 hours. And they contrasted that with another group of people who were paired into doing conversations. But they had that group of people move around the city. They went to like 4 different locations. And what they found is that the people who moved to different locations, even if their conversations were of shorter duration, they reported feeling a stronger connection to the other person. So, what does that have to do with us? The more we're able to interact with people, maybe we can't interact with them in person, but maybe we can interact with them virtually through email, through one social media platform, and then maybe a third social media platform, and then maybe your website. Well, now you've just created 4 points of contact. So the more you're able to get people interacting with you in different places, the more likely they are to want to work with you in the future. Our brains don't really understand the difference between virtual places and in-person places yet. The technology has evolved really quickly. So this is something, if you have an event, maybe post about it on one social, maybe make like a Facebook group that you're like, okay, guys, if you want to be in this event, come over to this Facebook group over here or something like that. So that way we're just trying to create that additional point of contact. Going to the original point of this slide, you're like, what is this? I would say that when you're making your course, I strongly recommend video, including some sort of video component, as in recording yourself. The reason why video is so important is because out of all the media formats, it's the most flexible. So if I hold an in-person workshop, but I record it, and you can see this on our Diverses channel, but these are things that we've also found, for instance, in my main teaching business as well. If I record a video, I don't just actually have a video. I have multiple things. You can see the headphones over there. I have an audio file. I can take the audio from my video and turn that into a podcast, which is what we do for Diverses. And that's also what we do for, again, my teaching business. What I can also do is if you put it on YouTube, YouTube creates an automatic transcription. You can take that transcription and run it through ChatGPT and say, hey, can you take out the timestamps? Can you add some punctuation? Can you make this look good? So you just copy and paste the transcription that YouTube makes and give it to ChatGPT. ChatGPT makes it look nice. You can then turn that into multiple blog posts. Or if it's a really long workshop, you could even potentially make that into a little ebook or something like that. In addition, if your workshop is 10, 20, 30 minutes, or even shorter than that, what you can also do is you can take that long workshop and you can take sections of it into smaller videos. So then you can turn them into your reels for Instagram or Facebook, or your TikToks, or your YouTube shorts, or even maybe just some long form videos on YouTube that maybe instead of being a half hour, like here's like a 3 minute clip, here's a 5 minute clip, and things like that. So by making a video of what you're doing, you're actually like quadrupling your potential for outlets once your workshop is done. So I really can't push video enough. It just allows you so many more options, especially today. Okay. So, guys, we're right around the last 5 minutes or so of the workshop. I did want to leave some time for questions, or if there's people who want to kind of sign on with me. Again, if you would like to appear on screen, you are more than welcome to. I'm going to post that link again down in the comments. Otherwise, some things that would be helpful for me. If you found this workshop to be helpful or insightful in any way, you'd be sure to let me know. If you could let other people know, if you could let one other person know about what we're doing that you think would benefit from this, that would be greatly appreciated. I also do want to highlight again in your emails, I did send out this document here. So I just want to kind of like walk through some things that you can be thinking about. So this all goes back to different points that we discussed in the beginning. So who is your workshop for? This, if you go back again to our original slide, trying to decide what is the actual theme and then taking it from there. So if you're like, oh, I want to talk about figurative language. So what I could say, my workshop is for poets interested in using extended metaphor throughout their pieces. Okay, so my workshop is for poets who want to use extended metaphor throughout their piece. Next, we want to try to create that connection with your own work. My workshop connects with my work because I recently published a collection of poetry that uses extended metaphor, or I have a poem that won a prize that uses extended metaphor, something like that. Is your workshop going to be virtual or in person? My workshop will last. What is the time duration you think your workshop's going to be? I'll be honest, if you've never led a workshop before, time goes really fast. Do not underestimate your time. My workshop will need, you want to think about the materials that you're going to need. Your workshop venue, think about the space that you need. What do you need them to have? Do you need a table? How many chairs do you need? Do you need a whiteboard? Do you need a projector? My workshop will be for estimate how many participants you want there to be. And then, like we said, you want 5 to 10 times the amount of engagement as you're starting to get your event ready. So if you're again looking for 10 participants, that means ideally you want to start getting at least 50 to 100 people to express their interest. The last thing is you want to try to also tap into your own personal resources. Who are the people right now that if you turn to them and you say, hey, I'm doing this event, who are the people that would be excited for you, that would help push this for you, that maybe you would be interested in attending? These are all the things that you want to be thinking about immediately. There was one other thing I was going to say, but of course it slipped my mind. But as I think about that, that again kind of concludes our presentation. I will be here for the next 5-10 minutes or so, just in case someone has a question. Otherwise, again, thank you so much for being with me. Again, my name is Jeff. This is with Diversus Poetry. You can find us. Our main platform that we're using right now is Threads. We've been really excited about the very active writing community there, so it's been great. But you can also find us on YouTube at Diversus Poetry. And of course, you can reach out by email too, because if you have some ideas you just want to throw around. I would also encourage, if you're interested in video content, but you know nothing about video or you just don't have the time to do it, if you take a look at our website, diversuspoetry.com, What you'll find is that we offer services to help people create video content. If you guys are thinking about your own workshop, but you're like, I don't know how to record my own workshop, I want to do it, but I don't know how. That's again something that we definitely can help you out with if you check out the Stanzas Studios.